All right, well, good evening and welcome to our school board work session for Thursday, December 3rd, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. And we are here in the Junior Senior High School Performing Arts Center. So we just have 3 items on our agenda for today, and our agenda is posted on the website, but we're going to get a distance learning update. We're going to get a mid-year goals update from the superintendent, and then also we're going to celebrate some of the work that our food service department has been doing. So those are our topics for today. Anything to discuss before that? Are you ready just to dive right in? All right, sure. I will turn it over. We're all anxious to hear how distance learning is going and what our thoughts are for the coming weeks.
Right. So. Well, and it's the 4th day now as we get into this, and the timing was very interesting because as we were discussing before the meeting, today is the last day of the first trimester. And so tomorrow is a non-student day. There's no school for students tomorrow as the work day to end the trimester for the grading and the work that the teachers are doing to finish up their first trimester work. So our teachers and staff have done an exceptional job of figuring out what that looks like to have 1 week of distance learning, finishing your first try, and then moving into next week what that looks like for your second trimester. But I would say as I've been in buildings and I've talked to staff and principals this week, if there was a way to snapshot where we were in March and April, and even September when we had a 2-week break at the junior senior high to where we are now, by no means do we have all the answers. We don't, but have we made incredible growth in what we've been able to provide for experience for students through this situation that I don't think anybody would argue is the best place. I think we would want our students back in school. That's where we obviously want our students. We miss them dearly every day. Knowing this is the best option right now, I feel like what we're providing is an improved experience based on what we had this spring. A couple things I would like to highlight with that. Right now, we are being able to support all of our Tier 1 eligible workers based on the executive order, so we haven't had to put any Tier 1 workers, families on a waiting list or anything. We have been able to provide that care as we've been expected. It's not been an easy task with staffing to be able to get that, and so as we continue to look at how our staffing model will work, if we can, depending on what the duration of distance learning is, if we can increase that number, we certainly will. But I feel positive because as I talk to our neighbors, there are districts around that really can't even serve their Tier 1 families because of the barrier of staffing. So I feel good about that for us. Our paraprofessionals are far more engaged in distance learning this time around. They did extremely valuable work for us this spring, but it really was finding work for them to do to be able to stay active and stay employed and stay engaged. Right now we're supporting learning. And so when I reached out to principals to say, and with collaboration with community ed to say, do you have paras that you can use to help support the child care? They're accounted for. They're being used to support students in their learning, which is what we want them to be doing, as that's what they're hired for and their skills are set for. We are starting now next week to be able to begin to bring some students back in school. We did do, as we talked about last time, kind of a 2-week quarantine window of moving into distance learning. As of now, we're seeing, and just at the end of my conversation here, I'll give just a brief COVID situation update as part of this conversation, but we are seeing some of our quarantines being reduced. We're seeing some things on the positive track based on that. So we're strategically looking at who we can bring back into our building beginning next week, whether it's special education students, EL students, intervention students. We've been very cautious not to do that list, knowing that we want them all here and they all could benefit from being here. And so we're trying to work with principals and with teachers to prioritize that. And that looks a little different at Hartley. That'll look like some specific students being invited by specific teachers based on special education needs, intervention needs, similar at WIS. At the high school, it'll be a little bit more teacher by teacher, kind of by appointment, to get groups of 9 or less so that we stay within the 10 kind of group boundary that our governor has asked us to do. But we're probably going to be seeing a rotation of students potentially have the availability to come into school starting next week, with the obvious consistent mindset that if we could bring them all in, we would, and we wouldn't be in distance learning. So we have to be really cautious about what that looks like for that. Starting again also next week, based on that kind of that 2-week quarantine setup, I know that Hartley has a plan to send some paras to work over with the students in the Tier 1 childcare to help support them with their distance learning while they're in childcare during the day. Because of some other obligations, I haven't connected with Mr. Hutmeyer to see if WIS is doing something similar, but I'm sure they are. Our conversations, we've crossed paths a little bit today on that. Mr. Forshee will talk here in just a minute about what's going on with food service, but I could not be, I'm going to put it on the tee here for you though, Jason, but I could not be any more proud to be part of a district that has gone really above and beyond to make sure that if we can provide a service for kids, we're going to. And our food service is really, if there was anything to celebrate, I'm just excited to have him here in a few minutes to talk to us about that because they're doing exceptional work. I think again, not to steal any of that conversation, but we're going to hopefully participation picks up based on this conversation tonight. Maybe hopefully people watching at home now will be a little bit more aware of our pop-up sites. But we also know that it's exciting for students to be able to have those really positive, well-managed meals in their day. At Hartley specifically, material pickup was Monday, and so we had a chance. Ben said that 90% of our families were able to get there on Monday to get their materials, and then they'll do that again next Monday for what we hope is potentially the second week, and then we're done with our distance learning break for right now. But then, as of Tuesday, they headed out to everybody else who was unable to get to school for whatever reason. Both at WIS and at Hartley, as I mentioned earlier, the model is really to provide at least 2 opportunities for live group time with the teacher, either in the morning meeting time, a small group session, sometimes at the end of the day, kind of a check-in, check-out kind of opportunity, not to have students with their experience in front of the Chromebook all day, every day, but to also have the opportunity to do some different things, but make sure there's opportunities there as well. In addition to that, our teachers are setting up times for students to check in that they might need help or have extra questions or things they can work on outside of, some of the paper pencil things they might have brought home. They might have questions on those things. At the junior senior high, very similar in the sense of daily Google Meets, some live times, office hours, multiple times to connect with teachers and staff. One of the groups of students that our surveys really indicated we needed to continue to work on serving better is the students who had chosen distance learning already this fall, and hopefully we're able to get them kind of reconnected if they weren't in this particular model. I'm talking with Dr. Miller about offering more opportunities here beginning next week for synchronous learning too, where teachers will be teaching and students can live in and see what's happening in the classroom. Again, like we mentioned, that's not necessarily good for a student to do that all day for the whole day, every class. But particular classes would be appropriate to do that for that, particularly those that may not be best suited for in-person learning. They won't get that touch with that. Our problem-solving team at the high school has changed focuses a little bit this fall. Our counselors were here a few weeks ago to share some of that with you, but we're really focusing on student outreach, and the student problem-solving team is meeting weekly, working on failures, missing work, doing home visits, getting out to see what's going on with students and finding out what's happening. And, while I can't ever say it's 100% because you can do the very best you can. As the trimester ends, we don't think that there are very many students who are going to be surprised by the marks they see as they finish this trimester with the work they've done. As we balance distance learning, and I should mention at the ALC too, Mr. Hager has got an excellent plan to start bringing students in by appointment next week as well, based on their ALC model, to make sure because we know that the attendance of our ALC students can be an extremely challenging situation through the distance learning model for that. The one thing I would mention, based on some of the feedback survey that we have, and I mentioned it briefly a minute ago, is that we are trying to do the very best we can to balance content time and student learning with that social emotional learning of what it means almost to learning how to be a human, and I think that's and what I mean by that is, unfortunately, what sometimes our experience can be is that, I would love to say that every student is engaged in work for 6 hours of every school day, when in fact, there's a portion of that that's contact time, and a portion of that is learning how to be a good person and learning how to interact with others and learning how to socialize and what's the boundaries. And so when families are supporting your children at home for distance learning, if it's a 2.5, 3 hour day of work, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on your classes. I mean, I know I've also heard from some students who take really advanced classes that it takes more than the full day. I don't want that to be the norm, but that sometimes happens too. Just remember that's a balance. That's what we're trying to support our families in every way we can with that. The only other thing I would say is our plans for returning are going to be based on obviously our COVID-19 numbers and what our situation is here in school, but based on the survey results. And I was able to send you the staff survey results last week. If we were able to have some comments about them, I shared some summaries. As well, I'll hopefully be sharing the student and family surveys here with you, if not by the end of this week, right away Monday if I can, to see that. And we know that when we come back to whether it's hybrid learning, whether it's in-person learning, whether it's particular school, we've learned what we can do better already. And so working with principals and staff and students in terms of some listening groups, which I'll talk about here in a minute, to learn what can we do better when we do come back in. So it's not just about going back to what September through November 30th looked like, because we know there are things we can get better in that regard too. So I'm excited about that. Overall, it's been I don't think we were expecting smooth, and I don't think it has been. You can never say it's 100% smooth, but we have learned a lot in the last couple months that we implemented in the last week. I will say too that our teachers and paras and our entire staff did an exceptional job with last Tuesday and Wednesday, using those days to really be as prepared as they could be for this Monday. For example, there were some things last Tuesday and Wednesday that came up, such as busing, such as who's going to be in person, such as childcare issues that we just could not have foreseen until you're actually in that moment. And that Tuesday, Wednesday really provided them the opportunity to do that. Just as a brief, I won't spend a lot of time on this because I think we all kind of just know where we are. But, our county case rate today was quite high again. You saw that published in the MDH, 145 was our 2-week rate. Next week's expected to be the same. Keep in mind that's a delayed number. That's the rate from the 11th through the 21st of November. So that's just part of our conversation. Interestingly enough, which will be an interesting conversation at the statewide level, there was only one county in the state that was below that 50 range, and they were, I think, 47. So it was Cook County up north. And so I wonder at what point does that guidance still serve the same purpose it intended to early in the year? Because if everybody's there, but still there are some districts that could do more in-person learning, I'm interested to see how the Department of Health, adjusts that going forward. We do still have, a number of students and staff that are in quarantine. We've got 35 staff and students combined in quarantine right now. Now, compared to the almost, it was 170-ish, I think when I reported this to you 2 weeks ago, that's been a very positive thing. We've been out of school for now almost 2 weeks, and that's going to be what happens. One of the things that I am not concerned about, but very conscious of, is there are probably several families and students that we don't know about who are in that quarantine, or maybe even we have eight current active cases right now between staff and students, and so that's again down from where we were, just a week ago. So, because the county numbers are not expected to decrease significantly in the next couple of weeks, we really need to keep hearing from our families and our students. Because staff will tell us because they're here working. But our students and families really need to keep us informed if they have a positive case, if they need to be in quarantine, so that we have an accurate picture of what's happening in our school community. Because I want no more than anybody, same as everybody else, and so does our staff, to have kids back in the building as soon as it's appropriate. But I know we've talked about this in previous discussions. The absolute last thing we want to do is come back to school for a week and a half or 2 weeks thinking we were in a better spot than we probably were, and then have to make a quick rebound again. And so the more accurate information we have from our students and our families, we'd really appreciate that. That'd be great. Best strategy right now seems to be, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, kind of waiting through the Thanksgiving impact. Should probably roll itself through at the end of this weekend, getting into the beginning of next week. And I would consider early next week to be a good time to really kind of make a final decision on whether or not it's reasonable to get back for some days in December, or if we need to wait till after winter break. I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful, particularly when I see that it seems to be working in our school community. I'm just always conscious because our county numbers aren't really going down if there's things I don't know about yet. So we have to do some work in the next couple days to try to figure that out, and make sure we have staff ready to go. And you probably have heard, the high school league came out with information today. Essentially, the gist of it is, when the pause is over, we can start. And here's the schedule. Based on local decision, based on your learning model, based on all of those things. So right now, I don't think we have a decision to make until we know for certain, or we have a better idea that pause is actually going to be lifted on the 19th, because I don't know that, based on what's going on in the county and the state, if that's going to be the reality or not. We'll just wait and see. So, but we want our kids to be able to play too. We just know that right now we're not in school because of activity in school, because of those cases in school. So I feel like if we're ready to come back in, then we're good to go. But if we're still having cases in our school community, then we'll make that decision when we get there in the next week or so for that. So that's the first part of our evening, and I wanted to share with you that learning update.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Superintendent? My only question would be, so those students that might be invited back into the building, the earliest they would be contacted would be next week. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think several of them have already been contacted to help work through those scheduling plans, because transportation's supporting us with that as well.
Yep.
But yeah, there will be nobody back in the buildings until next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, if anyone at home and you are in quarantine or you test positive, please let the school know.
Yeah, we really would appreciate that. And it's not because we have anything else really to follow up with from a school perspective, but we need to we want to be able to make the best decision we can with real information, because like we said, we care about nothing more than getting our kids back in school safely.
Yep.
And we do not want to be a bouncing situation as best we possibly can.
And then I assume next week you'll communicate to parents about what the following week will be, that kind of thing. Correct.
Yes. We'll look. Yeah, we'll look at that after the weekend here, and then communicate what we have happening right now after this weekend, and we'll let the board know and the community know what's happening there.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So if there's no other comments or questions, we can go on to item 2 on our agenda, which is just a mid-year update from the superintendent on the goals that he's been working on.
Yes, certainly. Thank you. So I did give a couple documents for you to review, and Charlie, I think you've seen this previously in a committee meeting, and so this is just talk about the update of my goals here for that. Things you have in front of you, just one is, if you recall when we made this partnership and we talked about this, I did present a leadership entry plan for us to consider, and so as I think through that, and I look at what I was hoping to accomplish here in these first few months, I think some of these have looked differently. I mean, focus groups and program tours and a board retreat and things like that have looked differently given our fall situation. But I think in terms of communicating and connecting and really starting to become engaged in the Waseca community and school district, I feel good about that. So I just give this to you as just a one more touch point as a reference for you. But then I do want to spend some time going through the other document which I provided, which is my performance goals that we talked about in July. And you've seen a copy of this before without the bullet points on there, but now I'm kind of calling this my working results copy with that piece. And so I think the piece to highlight in goal number 1, when you think about instructional model of in implementing the pandemic plans, the instructional models, making sure that our students are growing and providing learning opportunities for students, through our work sessions, through our updates, through our strategic planning reports, we've been able to continue to communicate with the board where we're at with some of those things. I think that the feedback loop that we're creating with families, students, and staff that we just finished up here in November is going to be a really important piece to this as we get into that part of the goal, because we want to make sure that we are hearing what our students and staff are feeling, particularly when it comes down to academic achievement. You know, I have connected with Dr. Miller, particularly because of just the junior-senior high dynamic, about the students who are struggling this fall. The number of failures is down, which is a good thing. But we do have kids that are, this isn't working. And so we have to continue to outreach and figure out how we can support them. Talked about the feedback surveys here, the listening sessions we've got going on with staff and students. Probably those bottom 3 bullets are probably the biggest key for what's coming up here for student performance. So the World's Best Workforce Report is due here December 15th for us. So that's completed based on data we have from student growth for previous years and determining where our gaps are and what we've got so far, particularly since that's going to help measure some of the stuff we had from this spring with that gap. I think preparedness for kindergarten is what jumps out at us as an initial item to think through how that was impacted by the lack of pre-K opportunities potentially this spring for students. So how that's going to roll out for us, given just the timing of our board meetings, is that our District Accountability Advisory Committee meets tomorrow afternoon, and we're going to present, Brooke McGuire and I, in partnership with the principals, will present the World's Best Workforce Report that we've collected through those results, as well as present some ideas for growth and improvement based on what we're learning so far for those ideas. Based on that committee's approval, we'll go ahead and submit it to the state, because it doesn't necessarily need board approval anywhere on the survey that we have to present to the state. But then on the 17th, we certainly will present that to the board, for the full board and the community to see the World's Best Workforce Report. And we certainly then can amend what we have submitted to the state. If anything, the board has any questions or anything, we need to follow up with that. But the timing of where our board meetings fell and when it needs to be actually submitted to the state was such that we're going to present it in that order. Mm-hmm. But that goal is moving along. I think that what I'm finding is that our buildings do an excellent job at looking at student performance and student data, but but it's very customized. So what Hartley looks at is what's really important to Hartley, and what the intermediate school looks at is what's important to them, and so on and so forth. And so when I'm trying to get a sense of what our K-12 scope is, that's requiring a little bit more digging, which is fun and it's exciting to do, and the performance has been good, so it's a positive thing. But we're looking through where we have there, and we talked about a previous work session, particularly about the life journey, that we don't want to make any generalizations about gaps. And so hopefully through this World's Best Workforce process, we'll get some ideas more where we're at with that. And the state really just came out probably 2 weeks ago with what our modified World's Best Workforce Report should look like. And so we were ready to go on October 15th to start preparing this report, and we just kind of had to hurry up and wait a little bit with that. For goal number 2, the community engagement goal, I think that the first part of that measure, I've really had, again, particularly in the summertime when we were relatively quiet in what we could do for social interactions, and then not having evening events has been a little bit of a challenge to get out there. But through Rotary, through the Waseca Area Foundation, Waseca 2030, been able to engage in some community events to help support what's happening there. And based on the recommendations of all of you as well as the staff, I've had the chance to meet with several local leaders and local people in the community, and every time I meet, that list grows, because you should talk to that person and that person and that person, and it's really been intentional, at least 2 or 3 times a week to get to know somebody new, and even to the point where today I was on a Rotary call, and I just lost it. The Bethlehem Inn was giving their presentation. And it just clicked to me about, wow, what an excellent opportunity when we're to that point. Our ALC is looking for mentorship opportunities for their students. And, we talk about mothers with their children who are going through an event at the Bethlehem Inn. We maybe have some students at our high school or our ALC who are 16, 17, 18 years old and have experienced something like that, who we may be able to connect. So that's how we're really trying to increase and engage those community contacts. Through staff and students, also working through some listening sessions. Had a chance to meet at every building and hear from staff in November and hear some feedback of how they thought things were going. I'm consistently impressed with our staff for not only the great work they do, but the openness and honesty and just willingness to share what's really happening. In some cases, I think there's some hesitancy to share, with a new superintendent about things that might seem critical or complaining, but our staff has done it so respectfully and so appropriately, and their feedback has been from a place of, we just want it to get better. And so I've really felt positive about those. One thing I have taken out of some of those conversations, though, is that we should do that with students as well. And so starting in, hopefully coming back here in December or January, we'll be doing some listening sessions with some student groups at each building too, because the survey doesn't necessarily provide the same impact for students. We're in the media when we can, and we're keeping that in the weekly update to all of you when that comes through. Starting in November, you may have noticed, because it was the first one, it may have felt relatively random, but we will start seeing a monthly column in the Waseca County News from me each month. I think it's going to be the third week of the month is what I've got slotted in there to provide an update on the schools and what's happening here in our district. So I feel good about that. With that, I think then finally for just kind of the monthly updates regarding the community engagement, I talked about Rotary. I talked about the Minnesota Educational Partnerships is Minnesota State Mankato and our local districts who are around here in terms of talking through our TOSAs and our student teachers. And we are going to proceed, hopefully, got to make sure they're up for it with hiring a couple of those interns that we talked about this spring to substitute for us and hopefully become recruitments for us. Every time I go to a meeting, whether I'm at Winnegar or I was at Birdseye the other day, I'm always thinking about what our career pathways can be and how do we connect students to our community and what are some areas we maybe haven't explored yet. We have a lot of them. We have a fantastic setup there, but there's always ways we can connect more. And as with any kind of leadership change, some focus somewhere else might be just a difference. That's all it is. So we get the benefit, our students get the benefit of both those lenses as we move through that. It was pretty exciting. The other thing I'm going to be starting and thinking about in January is, and we'll see how it goes, but it's something that I've seen I thought was a very interesting concept is opening up a coffee with the superintendent. Like an option for, we'll probably have to start in January with a Google Hangout of some kind, right? Versus me going to, the Pheasant or something. But it's going to be basically the opportunity for any community member who wants to just to click in and ask questions. And I'll probably have some topics I want to cover for each time. And we'll do that once a month. And I'm going to try to do that for staff as well. And I don't think that's going to, it's not going to contradict, or it's not going to really, I talked to our principals about that, and they feel like, what a great idea. That doesn't really, overshadow them in their work in the building or anything. It's just a different kind of connection. And when I think about particularly goal number 3 and some of our facility planning, I'm hopeful that's going to be the opportunity to start also planting getting some feedback, planting some seeds of some things we're thinking about as we move forward with that. For goal number 3, is it okay? Would you like me just to go through all the goals and then we can ask questions at the end? Is that the best plan?
Yep, I think it's going fine.
So I feel like I'm talking a lot. But goal number 3, was really the facility goal, and that was the goal around ensuring that even in the midst of a pandemic, we don't forget that we have some long-term facility maintenance needs, whether that's a building potentially conversation with the Hartley building, whether it's some long-term needs at WIS or the central building, and then even the things we chose not to do here in this building at our last round. And so where we're at right now with that, and you've had a recent update on this, but even more of an update here. So as the Finance Committee has met, we've talked about funding opportunities, talked about ways we could potentially look at what we need to do in terms of financing any kind of facility project. Elizabeth Beery and Colin Green and I have met a couple times with both Ellers, as well as now we've met with a couple facilities companies. We use Wold, and they're a great partner for us, but we also know that as workload increases for a project like that, so we've looked at something called Site Logic, which is another company that does project management. And whether we need that or not, we don't know yet. It's just kind of putting that in our back pocket as a resource to have connected with that. So we're looking at those different options. We know that, and Elizabeth will share with us at the December meeting how the audit came out, and right on budget. What we're seeing in our preliminary numbers. She shared that with us last time too, but even more confirmed in the last week or so that things are looking very good for our audit in terms of where we are where we thought we would be, which is really good. And then probably the most exciting part, and I started really digging into this in the last 2 weeks, is anytime we're looking at a major facility change, whether we decide to do a remodel, whether we decide to do a new or addition or whatever we decide to do, that's the perfect time to analyze your programming and determine what's the best fit for your buildings, whether that's remains a K-3 building, 7, 12, and so on. And so I've started to gather a collection of just ideas and resources, and fortunately in this area, several superintendents that I'm connected to have had experiences in districts where they've done different types of grade level alignments. And so I've been doing quite a bit of circling the information wagons a little bit in the last week or two, so that on Monday, the first meeting is happening on the 7th here for the task force that's going to start looking at what are grade levels in a perfect world, how we want to line them up. And then we'll have to see how that matches our facility reality. But then we'll go from there. I'm a believer, as you all know, that the plan drives the budget first. If we can make it work within our budget, then I think we want to be at the best programming setup we can be. If we have to make some adjustments because of the realities of finances, that's part of the world. That's part of how it works. But we want to start with what we want to have in mind there. This first meeting, and just so that everyone's kind of in the loop on this, so this first meeting is going to be its principals and some board members who are going to be part of that conversation. And then after that, we will want to definitely engage teachers, some parents, probably some community members, some students, and so it won't be just a administrator board conversation. We certainly want feedback from our community, from our teachers, but we're gonna frame that first question of what do we really want to know on Monday, and then we'll start to engage some other stakeholders on what that could look like, because we just want to be prepared that in January, then based on the goal, we're starting to come together on here's what we really think we'd like to do. And then we'll see where the pandemic is, and we'll see what the reality is of what we actually want to proceed with as a board. But I think we're coming together on that goal as well. And then I think the last goal is one that's probably more of a springtime type measure goal, is with the finances here. But our first step of working with Elizabeth, and she's done a fantastic job of keeping me updated and making sure that my questions are answered on the audit as we see things coming through financially, and particularly as this budget year goes on and we see that, I don't know if any of you read in the paper, there's 12,600 less public school students in Minnesota this year. And so, quick math tells you that's $81 million at about 7,000 a student. And so that probably could be where part of that surplus is coming from. We figure that out for that, but unfortunately that means not coming to us, and so we have to work through that. But our budget is looking to be, but Elizabeth does a great job with that. But then our plan for the next year, starting right after the first of the year, we just visited today, but looking at staffing for next year and what our enrollment projections are going to be, what the budget projection is going to be, so we can get closer to that balanced budget time, so we can continue to remain financially solvent in a positive place going forward. We have a very solid fund balance that is, at times, it's very strategically appropriate to spend that down to where we can, because it's made to provide services for students. It's not really there for a bank account. It's there to provide students. But we also have to be prepared that we can't spend more than we take in. That's just not how the world's going to work for too long. A year or two here and there strategically, absolutely. Long run, that's going to be great. The good news is we have quite a few exciting things going on that are efficiencies that I don't think it's not certainly going to be any kind of reduction. It's just going to be of a renorming of how we want to do things going forward. So I think right now, to where I'm at with my goals, I feel comfortable that we're moving along with them. I think that they fit this interesting school year well, and I was meeting with a director today, having an eval meeting with with them. And, it's a little bit of, wow, you sure know a lot already. It's like, well, I didn't really have a choice given this particular year. Not a lot of observation time this particular year, but I do feel good. I appreciate the support the board has provided this entire fall. I don't feel like I've ever had a question I wasn't able to get an answer. I get support from all of you. Thank you for being so on the ball and prepared and ready to go for our conversations, because I feel like our district is continuing to move forward. So.
Awesome. Well, I definitely feel like you're making really good progress on your goals. And of course, we do have the evaluation committee that meets monthly, which I'm sure is a good sounding board for you as well. But these are all really exciting things to be working on this year. So that's great. Any other questions for the superintendent about the goals? Cool.
It is really exciting to work on things that are not COVID-19 sometimes.
I believe you.
Right.
Yes. I did just want to, since it's not exactly mid-year, but it's kind of mid-year, but just a reminder for the board that we do have goals as well. And we're working on our mental health, understanding, race relation awareness, those kinds of things. Our next time that we're going to meet for our life journey discussion will probably be the February workshop. So just kind of keep that in mind. Work on the next, I can't remember how next module basically. Yeah. We have made a goal to be more active in our buildings or in our school events. That's a little hard to do this year. But I know that I ran into Dave earlier and he said he just got done talking to Dr. Miller, and I'm sure anyone would appreciate a phone call or an email. So I encourage everyone to do that. Stay active on our board training. So whatever you're able to do with MSBA or otherwise is useful. And then of course to support our superintendent to achieve his goals. So I think we're all in a good place with our goals that we set for ourselves as well. So, all right, well, if there's nothing else to talk about with goals, we can move on to talking about food service. I'm going to invite Mr. Jason Forshee to come up here. And as I told him earlier, this is probably the thing, if we had to have a pandemic, this is the thing that I'm most excited about, that we have been able to give our students free food for as long as we have. So I'm excited to hear about that, and also just generally how it's going in the food service department.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do is just start with kind of where we're at and what we're doing, and then some things that we did different this year that we didn't do back in that March to June time last year, and then just give you some updated numbers on where we're at and whatnot. So about 3 weeks ago, we started offering some hot meals on either a daily basis if we're in the distance learning model, or if we were doing the hybrid, we were offering it on the pickup days, one hot meal a day. And that's been going good. It was a challenge for my staff. If you remember back in March last year, all the meals that we did were all cold and they had to warm them up. Now we have them in microwavable containers. They are hot. So if the person picked them up and chose not to eat them at that time, they could put them in the refrigerator and in a container that's ready to be warmed for later that day or whatever. So I think that's going well. What we got going on is we still have our 2 pickup sites. They are different than what they were in the previously. When I say previously, I'm thinking of the March to June last year. And that is Hartley Elementary and the Waseca Junior Senior High School. The sheds are here, and I know we've done some social media stuff with pictures and different things. But when we're in distance learning, they're open daily from 11 to 1. And then when we're in a hybrid model, it's 11:30 to 1 o'clock. So the time, 11:30 to 1. So the time does change just a half hour based on which model we're in. And then the other thing that we started was the pop-up sites. And so we're at University Park, Northwest Park, and Team Academy parking lot from 11 to 11:20. And then we hit our second site at 11:30 to 11:50, and that's Southview Park, Loon Lake Park, and Northeast Park. And it's been going pretty good. When the deliveries, we're not doing deliveries because we're not at a stay-at-home order. Mr. Hudspeth was kind enough to allow us to do these pop-up sites. We were able to work with the bus companies and get some transportation. Right now we're using 2 buses and we're using 1 van. So they're hopefully, it's kind of a visual for people. And it's going pretty good. This was our first full week. And we averaged about 437 lunches and 437 breakfasts each day this week in our average. We had some high days, at special sites that were more, and some days that were lower. It was weird, but today happened to be the pop-up sites had record numbers, which it was a 2-day meal. So because there's no school tomorrow, we offered 2 meals at the curbsides and at the pop-up sites. The curbsides were down and the pop-up sites were up. All the rest of the week, it was the numbers were higher at the curbside and lower at the thing. So it is a challenge for my staff, but I have to tell you, and I do have to thank them for their hard work. I mean, my staff has been unbelievable through this with the challenges and switching from hybrid to distance learning. And next week we're going to throw a curveball at them, and we're going to bring some students back into the building, and we're going to feed those kids along with our tier 1 people that we've been feeding during this distance learning deals. So they've just been amazing and have adjusted to every curveball that we throw them, and I haven't had any real negative. They're staying positive about it, and they know we're here to help kids. Taking you back and just doing a little recap of where we were at last year. So last year it was cold meals. We didn't do any hot meals, didn't have those containers and anything, and we were in the 500s. So it was just the low 500s. So the numbers are down a little bit. We're not sure why. We tried to do something hopefully that was more exciting, a little bit more user-friendly, and we're a week into it. So I told both Elizabeth and Eric that I wanted to see what happens after a couple weeks, and if we need to make some adjustments, we'll do something, look at that and see if we want to do something different. The other thing I think that we're going to look at, depending on where we're at, is maybe we'll look at doing a survey. Maybe we'll send it out to, we don't want to do it just to the people who are picking up meals, but maybe we want to do a survey out to all families and just get some feedback from them. We've never done that recently, but maybe we can figure out that they can give us some help on things that they'd like to see or what is different. I've taken a few phone calls from folks, the daily pickup. We've got some people who live in the country that doesn't work the best for them to come to town every day. So we have, we'll make some accommodations based on request, where if they call in and say, hey, I want to come pick up on Mondays and Thursdays like you did during the distance learning days. If we know about that, we can accommodate that, we'll do that. We're starting to have a lot of daycares reach out to us because their food program has actually changed with COVID and the funding dollars for them, and they've actually went from a tier 1 to a tier 2, which affects the dollars that they get. So some of those are reaching out to us. We currently service 2 daycares that are either coming to our pop-up sites or coming to our curbside sites. And I had a call today about anywhere up to 6 more daycares that wanted to know, because the rule is 18 and under, everybody eats free under the SFSP, which is what we're currently running under. So that's kind of a recap of everything. We're just going with the times, and Mr. Huspett's been great to keep us in the loop about when a possible change might happen, so I can give my staff some notice and we can plan for it. And obviously when you're serving the number of kids that we currently are and you change to the hybrid model, I got to have more food on hand and we got to do things a little bit different. So I appreciate those updates and keeping me in the loop to make good decisions, to have stuff here, based on the number of students we could be seeing. So, and obviously the admin team's been great about telling us what they're looking at for next week and how many people could be, coming into our buildings, and how we're going to work that to make that, it's another feeding opportunity for us. So I think with that, I think we'll be right close to our numbers, but I still am want people's input, I think. So I encourage anybody to, call the food service office, obviously, if they have any questions, or, we'll do what we can within reason, and we're here to help feed kids and whatnot. So I think the only thing left would be if anybody has questions.
So we don't require people to like say that they're coming that day. So how do you know what to do?
Well, and I think the big thing is it's my staff and just what we've done for years. We really don't get lunch numbers for the most part. We get some numbers at Hartley when they're in school, but otherwise, kids seem to be, history tends to repeat itself. I'll take one site and I'll give you some numbers. 74, 98, 95, 75, and 75. So, you have a 20 meal difference a day at that one site. We plan for a little extra. The good thing is there's very little waste. And when I say that, so we might plan for 20 more at that site than what show up today. But then we turn around and those meals get froze and are put away. And then we turn around and when we offer those extra meals, boom, we have them. They're ready. They're already made up. And we offer them as that additional day. We're going to do another one on the 23rd of January, where we're going to offer, that'll be a 3-day meal. Today was a 2, that'll be a 3. So we can offer them 3 meals on the 23rd to cover the 24th and 25th. So they have an opportunity that day. I'm going to expect that our numbers are going to be up a little bit like they were today because of those extra meals that we do. We can give them up to 10 meals a week. That's 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches, and the state rules say that we can give them up to 7 at one time. Well, what we're doing right now is 2 a day unless we have those bonus days, and if you use the 23rd of December as an example, we'd actually be giving 7 or 6 that day, which would be 1 less than what the maximum number we can give out at one time. So
Okay.
We're just doing it kind of based on what works and whatnot.
Right. And I don't know if everyone knows this, but you do post the daily menu online. So, and that is for the distance learning menu, and then it'd be different for in-school menus. So if
Yep.
you're curious what's at curbside that day, you just go online.
Yep.
So
The only thing that I should clarify in that, it is based on where you pick up.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're picking up at Hartley, it's gonna follow the Hartley menu. If you're gonna pick up at the high school, it's gonna follow the high school menu.
Yep.
If you're getting meals at the pop-up sites, they are going to be off of the Waseca Intermediate School menu because that's where they're produced at. So
Okay.
It is a little clarification. And the only thing that happens to it is our menus are always subject to change, even during the school year. With COVID and stuff, there's been supply issues and different things. And sometimes we have to make a change or a last minute deal. It's something that we can't control. Same with if we ran out of food one day or if we got low. Maybe today was chicken Alfredo. And let's say the pop-up sites just go crazy, we might have to quickly do something else to fill in that gap because to take and make chicken Alfredo from scratch in 15 minutes just doesn't work. So, so they're always subject to change. But, obviously, if you really like the menu that's at that site, the earlier you can be there, the better opportunity that you're going to get. But we didn't have any shortfalls this week. My staff produced more than what was picked up at all sites, so nobody got anything that they weren't expecting.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I haven't used it in this distance learning, but when we had it in September, my kids would go on, like if they really were missed a certain lunch that they were used to having at school, I'd be like, oh, it's on the menu today, and we would go and get lunch from school that day instead
Yep.
of my boring lunch that I make every day at home. So I appreciated the menu. That was really useful to
Yep.
kind of give us a variety in our lunch at home too. So
Yep. And the only thing we don't know is if this goes on for a while, we don't know when it's 20 below out, will that deter people from coming?
Yep.
Weather and different things like that. I think Eric and I have had a few conversations about if we have inclement weather, what we're going to do and stuff like that. And it all depends if we close that day or do something, then, my staff wouldn't report and we wouldn't do meals that day. So we'll just kind of keep that stuff out where we post it or get it out on the website or whatnot. So we keep people informed if there would be weird situations that happen like that.
yeah, definitely. Other questions for Jason, or go for it?
So with the boxes, the microwavable boxes and everything, does all that get paid for then with the aid that we're getting
Yes, so
Okay.
Elizabeth has been working with us, and
Yeah.
it's part of the CARES. So if it was a product that we didn't purchase for normal school before, we can submit that and get reimbursed for that, and she's been working with all of that. Same with the sheds and some other things. We have some boxes that we bought to take to the pop-up sites and stuff, and she runs all that through there. And then, of course, the money just would come back to the O2 fund. If we get, a grant or however they do that. Elizabeth knows a little bit more details on that than I do, but I do code all that stuff or mark it, so she knows, and then she submits that stuff through, I think it's called the CARES Act,
Yep.
that's what it's called, so.
Huh, thanks.
Do we have an end date yet for this program, or is it still just kind of keep doing it till they tell us not to? Or
So originally it was December 31st, and it did get extended for the entire school year.
Oh, great.
So kids' meals at school, and when I say that, if one student comes through and takes a reimbursable meal, all students are free until the end of the school year.
Okay.
Obviously, if they have a la carte or have an extra, that does come out of their lunch account, but all students that are in school attending pop-up site, curbside, come get a meal. There's no charge for that for the entire school year. So we were
That's
very
awesome.
happy that happened. The bad news is we didn't see as many free and reduced applications this year. And we do have to tell people, and I think it's important that everybody knows this, that the status of a free and reduced application, when it is turned in, is good until so many days into the next school year. So it usually took them to about mid-October. So we could have an issue next year where people did not submit an application because of the free meals deal, and then that would affect their eligibility to start the next school year. So it's
Okay.
just going to put more pressure on us to make sure that we tell people that, and that they really get their applications in next year, hopefully early, so we can process those and have them ready for, the start of school or orientation time or whatever, so.
is there a particular filing or deadline period for turning in those applications, or is it any time?
Yep, we
Okay.
take applications until the last day of school.
Okay.
And then it would be good into that next school year, up to that time that we have that grace period. I think it's 30 school days. So it's right around the middle of October that they would have that previous year status good until.
So you would still encourage people to fill that out,
Yeah.
even though we have free meals this whole year. So go ahead and fill it out. And send it
Absolutely,
in.
it's just going to help your status for next year
Great.
if you did qualify, it's like almost a little insurance into the next year.
Yep.
Per se, and it gets
Well,
them-
and also, I mean, a lot of our activity fees are reduced if you qualify for free and reduced. So it's not just meals. It does
Right.
affect your activity fees too.
Yeah,
so.
and it impacts a few of our federal funding sources significantly too,
Yep.
that we could see some significantly less revenue next year based on this year's count being lower.
Right.
So that's just something to consider. I certainly would appreciate if anybody's still able to do that.
And,
Yep.
and as I understand it, anyone can fill out that application. So
That's
it
correct.
doesn't matter what your income is, just you can fill it out.
Yep.
Yep. So, interesting. Other questions about food service? Or? Well, you guys are doing really great work, so.
Well, actually, I do.
Yeah.
Carol, I talked to Carol.
Yeah.
And she was actually quite surprised with how things were going.
Yeah.
So it was nice to hear.
It's definitely different for my staff, and I think, but like I said, they're doing an amazing job. We threw some curveballs at them this year that we were doing things different than we did last year, different sites, different containers, a lot of different things, the sheds. But if we were going to do it long-term, I thought we had to do some things. Having them be able to work out of a shed where they can stay warm, and that was important to me.
Yep.
We didn't have a lot of that cold weather in March. It wasn't too bad. We ran into some rain and stuff, but if we have a blizzard or a couple inches of snow come down, we're able to keep them in a good place and I think make it a little bit more convenient
Yep.
for the cars that are pulling up to, they have those things that they see now and go, the blue shed, that's where we go,
Yep.
type deal. So,
Yeah, no, it's a great program. I'm so, I wish we could always say give kids lunch for free, but
Yep.
and breakfast. But I mean,
Right.
yeah, it's as long as we can do it, I think it's awesome that we're
Yep.
doing that. So cool. Well, thank you. If there's nothing else for Jason, all right. Thank you so much for coming and
yes,
giving your
thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right, well, we have nothing else on our agenda for tonight unless someone wanted to add anything. Just a reminder that our next school board meeting is our regular school board meeting is December 17th, and it's at 6:00 p.m. because this is our truth and taxation presentation, and it cannot start before 6. So you guys can come at 5:30, but we'll just have to have a conversation for longer. So, and then in January, I don't know what the date is for whatever the first Thursday after the first Monday will be our organizational January meeting where we will seat the elected board members as well. So, do you know what the date is, Caitlin? Or
No, and it's one of our discussion topics for our next meeting.
perfect. All right, thank you. All right, that is all. Thank you, Chuck.